Here we go.
Okay, hello class. I'm not here today, but I'm still going to be teaching you the lesson. So what I'd like you to do is follow along with me and the worksheet that you have. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to review scientific notation. So I want you to take a minute and I want you to write the numbers below in scientific notation. Okay, as a review, when you're writing a number from standard form into scientific notation, the base has to be greater than 1 but less than 10, always times your time sign, times 10 to the power, which is how many places you moved your decimal. Okay, I can see that my first number, 43 million, okay, big number, positive exponent. If it starts as a decimal, it's going to be a negative exponent. I move my decimal back 1, 2, 3 spots to make it a number greater than 1 but less than 10. Now, I'm going to have you try and write the numbers below into standard form. When I'm writing the number into standard form, I'm looking at the exponent. It tells me how many places to move the decimal. I'm really multiplying 9.7 times a tenth 4 times, or I'm moving the decimal back 4 spots. Okay? Here I'm multiplying 5.8 times 10 3 times, or I'm moving the decimal up 3 spots. Okay? Now we're going to review what you do when you need to add or subtract in scientific notation. So you're going to fill in your notes. The first thing you need to do is write the number into standard form. You're going to make sure, the most important thing is that you line up your decimal, you add or subtract, and then you put it back into perfect scientific notation. So we're going to do the first one together. The first thing you're going to do is write your numbers out in standard form. So I'm going to move my decimal 5 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm adding 4 zeros. I'm moving my decimal 6 spots. Okay, now here's the most important part. You have to line up your decimals. Once the decimals are lined up, then you can add and write your number back into scientific notation. Let's go ahead and do that. There's my number in standard form, and now back into scientific notation. Okay, we should get 9.03 times 10 to the 6th. Now, I want you to try the next one. Make sure you line up your decimals. Okay, once you line them up and add, you should get 5.18 times 10 to the negative 3rd. So I wrote it out, I moved my decimal, I line up my decimal, I add, and I write it back into scientific notation. It's going to be the same for subtraction, so we're going to do the first problem together. The first thing we're going to do when we're subtracting is we're going to write the number out in standard form. So here I'm moving the decimal 4 spots. Here I'm moving the decimal 4 spots. Okay, so after I move the decimal 4 spots, I move the decimal 4 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna line up my decimals and subtract. Okay, notice my decimals line up. I'm gonna subtract. Okay, now that I have my answer, I'm going to write it back into scientific notation. 1.91 times 10 to the 4th power. Okay, now what I'm going to have you do is try the second subtraction problem. You should get an answer of 6.0757 times 10 to the 4th. So you're writing out the number into standard form. You're going to subtract, line up your decimals, and then write your number back into scientific notation. Okay, we're going to try 2 word problems next. Here's the strategy for word problems. Change the number first to kindergarten numbers. I know it sounds silly, but it helps you determine what operation you're going to use. So here's an example. The attendance at the Taylor Swift concert was 7.3 times 10 to the 5th people. The attendance at the Drake concert was 6.5 times 10 to the 4th people. What was the total amount of people that attended the concerts? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change my numbers. The attendance at the Taylor Swift concert was 4 people. The attendance at the Drake concert was 3 people. What is the total amount of people that attended the concerts? 4 and 3. There's 7 people. So I know that this is an addition problem. Now I know that I can add these together. I'm going to have you go ahead and do the addition. Okay, you should get 795,000 people total. I'm going to write my answer back into scientific notation. Okay, now let's look at the next problem. The attendance of the Lady Gaga concert was 5.65 times 10 to the 6th people. The attendance of the Kanye West concert was 4.3 times 10 to the 4th people. How many more people went to the Lady Gaga concert? Let's change the numbers. The attendance at the Lady Gaga concert was 6 people. The attendance at the Kanye West concert was 5 people. How many more people went to the Lady Gaga concert? What operation would you use here? We're going to use subtraction. Let's go ahead and subtract. Okay, now we're going to move on to multiplication and division. All right, the rule for multiplication, when you are multiplying, you are going to first multiply the bases. Then you're gonna, after you multiply the bases, it's always gonna be times 10, and you add your exponents. So if we look at the first problem, the first thing I'm going to do is multiply my bases. When we multiply our bases, we get 28.8. It's always then going to be times 10, and the shortcut is you add your exponents. -6 plus -8. Well, -6 plus -8 is -14. Okay, now I'm looking at my answer and I'm saying, is that in perfect scientific notation? No, it's not in perfect scientific notation. This number is greater than 10. So what I have to do is I have to move the decimal one spot. Now here's the strategy that I use. I use what's called LARS. Okay? If you move the decimal to the left, you have to add an exponent. If I'd be moving the decimal to the right, I'd subtract an exponent. But here I have to move it one more spot to the left, so I have to add an exponent to this. So it's 2.88 times 10 to the -13. Now I want you to try the next one. Okay? On your next problem, you should multiply the bases. You should add the exponents. I get 10.36 times 10 to the 8th. Well, that's not in perfect scientific notation, so use LARS. Move it left, you're going to add. So I'm moving left 1.036 times 10 to the 9th. Now let's look at division. All right, here's the rule for division. Number 1, if it's a word problem, the biggest thing on division, the word problems are going to say how many times greater. So I put that as the first thing in your notes just to remind you for division. Okay? The rule when you're dividing in scientific notation, a shortcut, you divide the bases, it's always times 10, and here you subtract the exponents. So let me show you how the first one's going to work. Here's my bases. 4.8 times 10 to the -5th divided by 2 times 10 to the -2nd. My bases are 4.8 and 2, so I'm going to divide them first. 4.8 divided by 2. I get 2.4, so that's my base. Times 10, when I divide, I subtract my exponents. So -5 minus -2. -5 minus -2 is -3. So 2.4 times 10 to the -3rd. Now I want you to try the next one. .25 times 10 to the 9th divided by 3.5 times 10 to the 3rd. First thing, you divide the bases. 5.25 divided by 3.5. Well, 5.25 divided by 3.5 is 1.5. Always times 10, and then I'm going to subtract my exponents. 9 minus 3 is 6. You should get 1.5 times 10 to the 6th power. Let's try our word problems. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with word problems. If I want to know what operation I'm going to use, I change my numbers. I'm going to change them to kindergarten numbers. That way I know what I'm doing in my word problem. Let's start with the first one. If 4.4 times 10 to the 11th phone calls were made by 2.2 times 10 to the 8th students, what was the average number of phone calls per student? Well, let's change the numbers here. If 15 phone calls were made by 5 students, what was the average number of phone calls per student? What operation would we use here? We would use division. So let's do division. 4.4 times 10 to the 11th divided by 2.2 times 10 to the 8th. I'm going to divide my bases. 4.4 divided by 2.2. Well, that's 2. Always times 10. When you're dividing, you subtract your exponents. 11 minus 8. 11 minus 8 is 3. 2 times 10 to the third power. Let's try our last word problem. The U.S. spends 1.2 times 10 to the fourth dollars on students each year. There are about 7.7 times 10 to the seventh students. How much does the U.S. spend on all of the students in a year? Well, let's change the numbers. The U.S. spends $5 on students each year. There are about 10 students. How much does the U.S. spend on all of the students? What operation would I use? I would use multiplication. So I'm going to multiply these numbers. Remember the rule. When you're multiplying your bases first. 1.02 times 7.7. Okay, when I multiply, I get 7.854. Always times 10, I'm going to add my exponents. Okay, 4 plus 7 is 11. Okay, they spend 7.854 times 10 to the 11th dollars. Now, here's the last thing I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you look at your foldable. Okay, it looks like this. Okay, I'm going to have you fold it in. There's 4 word problems. It tells you it's a subtraction problem. I want you to try it. I want you to try the addition. I want you to try the division. I want you to try the multiplication. This is the first thing we're going to go over on Monday. So if you don't finish, that is going to be your homework. Have a nice weekend, guys.